Yeah.
Well, I'd like to welcome folks. We have almost 35 folks now, and they're still coming in. I'm Mark Stevenson, the president of Napa Solano Audubon. And I have a number of announcements to make just to keep people informed. Number one announcement is, check our website. We try to keep our website up to date as much as possible. And there's all kinds of good things on our website. We were involved with 3 very successful CBCs this year. Benicia's CBC was led by Robin Leong, and they saw somewhere in the vicinity of 165 to 170 species in the Benicia area. It includes part of the Straits, as well as Grizzly Island area. The actual central point is somewhere along Highway 680, as well as parts of most of Benicia and parts of Vallejo. Murray Berner led the Angwin CBC, and he tells me we probably have at least 130 species that we're seeing in Angwin, which that's a trick because there's no real super waterways like other counts have. So 130 is a great number. 2 highlights, there is a phainopepla continuing at Lake Hennessy, and Lucas and I found again the returning Costas hummingbird in St. Helena off from Zinfandel Lane in the Garden Streets. And people have a feeder there, and the Costas was coming to their feeder and fending off Anna's hummingbirds, and there's a beautiful male singing a couple of times. So it's more than likely the very same bird that was there a year ago. Hopefully everyone can hear. I think for most of the time we'll have everyone mute themselves during the presentation, and then if you want to speak, unmute yourself, and then that prevents feedback from occurring during the conversation. So we had a 3rd CBC, and that was the CBC for kids, led by our new education coordinator, Tammy Sanders. It was centered at Connolly Ranch here in Napa, and we had over 20 kids that participated in that, and they saw almost 70 species of birds in the local vicinity right near Connolly Ranch in local Napa parks. They did a sensational job, and there are a number of young kids that were part of that have continued to go on Tammy's beginning bird walks. So we're very excited about that. At this time, I want to thank the many members and family and friends that contributed to this year's fall appeal, our fundraising campaign for the fall. There were many generous donors, and it will really help us provide the programs that we're trying to provide for you. Especially, it will help us to pay for our education coordinator, Tammy. And I have good news concerning her. Napa Valley Schools and other districts in Napa and Solano County are now allowing volunteers to come in. I was afraid with the new Omicron, however you say it, virus, that they would close their doors again, but we will begin our programs next week in Napa Valley Schools. So we're excited about that. Tammy has some great programs ready to go. As part of that, we're going to donate bird feeders to each school so that the kids can look at the wintering birds that are in their neighborhood. And thankfully, the not Orchard Supply Hardware, but they changed their name on me, but the hardware store here in Napa is donating some of those bird feeders and bird seed to get us started, which is really wonderful. I should know the name of it so that I don't mistake. It is Outdoor Supply Hardware. They changed their name, Outdoor Supply Hardware. Andrew Ford has just sent out an e-blast for this week's bird walk. He's going to be leading a walk this Saturday at Lynch Canyon beginning at 8. Lynch Canyon, if you don't know, is attached to Newell. It's a great place for wintering raptors. There are golden eagles, potential for rough-legged and ferruginous hawks, as well as merlin and other birds. So don't miss out on that. It starts at 8 o'clock at the gate to Lynch Canyon. Andrew has the gate code and will let folks in an hour before anyone else. Tammy will be leading a bird walk for kids on Saturday, I think February 12th, which will be part of the San Francisco Flyway Festival, which is being held in the Vallejo Mare Island area of the Bay from February 11th to the 13th. I know for a fact Murray Berner will be leading a hawk watch tour on Skaggs Island as part of that. There's numerous walks and events, and they will have their website up and running before long. It's called the San Francisco Flyway Festival. They put it on February 11th to 13th, and then the NFL unfortunately moved the Super Bowl to the 13th, but most of the activities will be over by the time the Super Bowl starts. So we encourage anyone interested to attend the San Francisco Flyway Festival. There's a tremendous number of really fun events. I want to also congratulate Wendy Cole and Bruce Thompson, along with Carol Boykin, who I see here in the audience, for doing a wonderful job coordinating our monthly trips. Our January trip went out to the Sacramento Valley Wildlife Refuges and was very successful. We saw 100 species, and highlights were such things as really close-up views of Ross's geese and tundra swans, herring gulls that are there in the winter, white-faced ibis, Wilson snipe, blue and cinnamon, blue-winged and cinnamon teal, and some of us got to see an American bittern. So it was a really fun trip, including ferruginous hawks and a merlin, and even an orange-crowned warbler that was overwintering there. The next monthly trip is on January 23rd, Sunday, January 23rd, to Merced National Wildlife Refuge. The trip is now full. If you are interested in attending one of these monthly trips, we encourage you as soon as you get the e-blast to sign up, because they typically fill up in less than a day. So there's a lot of interest in these trips. So if you're interested in attending one of them, and if it's full, put your name on the waiting list, because as normal, some people need to drop out for one reason or another before the trip begins, and you might be able to sneak your way in. Today I sent out a rare bird alert of a bird that was found on January 2nd at the DeRosa Museum along Highway 12 or 121 on the way to Sonoma. It was spotted as a kingbird, and when Lucas and I got there the following morning, and Murray Berner and some others, we determined that it was a tropical kingbird. It's the first record for Napa County that we're aware of a tropical kingbird. There's no records in eBird, and anyone else that we are aware of has never seen a tropical kingbird in Napa. So it's a wonderful, wonderful bird to see. It has been traveling between the art museum, DeRosa Museum, which is on the north side of Highway 12, flying across to Domaine Carneros Winery, which is on the south side. And they both have ponds or reservoirs, which the flycatchers like to find flying insects. So more than likely, this bird will overwinter in this location, but we encourage you to get out before long if you'd like to see it. We were able to see it, and it seems to hang out near the parking lot of DeRosa, and also in the willow trees at Domaine Carneros. So look in those locations, wait a few minutes, and it's bound to show up. Tom Sliker, our vice president here, has been doing a great job with birding notes. He sends those out as an e-blast to our members, but they're also posted on our website. So don't miss out on his birding notes. There's so many interesting things there for you to learn about. Tom has done a great job researching all kinds of things. He reads journals and newsletters from other organizations and comes up with a lot of really interesting pieces of information about birds and birding. So that's the end of my announcements. It's about 7:12 and we have about 40 people here already for you, Alvaro. It is my super pleasure to introduce Alvaro Jaramillo to everyone. Alvaro has kindly, at the last minute, volunteered to share his program on Colombia and the conservation movement to encourage birding in Colombia with us. Our speaker that was scheduled, Dr. Sam Vilos from Point Blue, came down with either COVID or a bad cold, and he lost his voice, so he was unable to talk. So we really appreciate, Alvaro, you stepping in. For those of you who have not met Alvaro, he spoke last year to a huge audience, and people really loved his talk on, it was birding the wine, was it the wine countries of the world, Alvaro? And Alvaro leads pelagic tours out of Half Moon Bay and sometimes Monterey and sometimes even Bodega, is a well-known pelagic birder all over. He also, his company runs tours all over the world. So I know last year they took a tour to the Galapagos Islands. That was really a lot of fun. He's had trips to Chile, Ecuador, Colombia, and many other locations, China. So without further ado, Alvaro is a tremendous birder, and I welcome him to our conversation. So I'm going to put us in speaker view, and there's Alvaro, and take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I'm glad I was able to be here when you needed me, because I know exactly what it's like. Sometimes you're scheduled to do something and you get sick, and you feel really, well, what can you do? But I'm glad this all worked out. This talk is hopefully you can see it, Mark. You see
Yes,
the screen?
yeah, okay. We're all good.
All right. This talk's a few years old, so if I'm a little rusty, just bear with me. And I pulled it out and fixed a few things, updated some stuff, but it's really about birding, and it's about Colombia, and it's also the interaction between birders, conservation, and even sort of the sociopolitics of what's gone on in Colombia over the years. So hopefully you'll be learn some new things, see some cool bird images here as we talk about Colombia. But this project that I was involved in was featured a few years ago now. I guess this was 2016 in Audubon Magazine, with a lot of images of a day we were doing trainings of people up in northern Colombia in a place called the Guajira Peninsula. And many of the people up there who are learning to become birding guides and nature guides are actually indigenous people of a group called the Wayu people. So often the women dress in really colorful clothing, and they make really colorful artwork. So there's a whole, it's an interesting situation to have people who grew up sometimes at home, not even speaking Spanish, speaking their own language, who we've trained not only to identify birds, but actually identify them and speak in English to people who are coming from another country. It's a whole complicated set of processes that you have to do to try to get people involved in the birding economy. And that's part of it that I'll talk about later, that this is really, these were projects to try to develop local economies based on birds, so that local small villages would be able to partake in a global type economy that's beneficial to the environment. But as far as Colombia goes, you might have heard that it's the country that has the most number of species of birds on Earth. It's incredibly diverse. And this number is probably even low now when I say 1,900 species. And some of them are just, fantastic, like this Vermilion Cardinal. That's a female. The male's all red. And it's a very close relative of our northern cardinal. But it has this crazy crest. And they call it the king of the forest, if you translate the name and it's found only in northernmost Colombia. But part of, if you ask, why is Colombia the country that has all of this diversity? There's actually very specific reasons, and it all comes together in one nation that is essentially no other country on earth really has this. First of all, it's in the bird continent. South America has more birds than Africa or Asia. So it's already in the right place. And if you look at Colombia here, and Panama comes out here, and you have Venezuela next door and Ecuador down south, it's bordered by Brazil. Two oceans, so two ocean basins, that's one thing. It has lowlands in the far east, and the north is like the llanos. That's actually a seasonally flooded savanna, and toward the south is Amazonia. So this is the Amazon. So these rivers flow to the Amazon. These rivers up here flow to the Orinoco. So the two major river basins in South America are included in this one country. Then it has the Andes. And both sides of a mountain have different, often rainfall and other things going on there. So anytime you have a mountain range like the Andes, it creates biodiversity, not only the east-west slope, but also the elevation gradients. And what is absolutely amazing about Colombia is that it has 3 different chains of mountains within the Andes. So there's this more isolated Eastern Andes, and there are actually 2 chains with a big valley down the middle, and also this other valley over here. So the valleys, the fact there are 3 mountain ranges, and then 2 isolated mountain ranges up in the north here, Santa Marta and Perijá Mountains, which really are the extension of the Eastern Andes, but there's a little break. So you have then lowlands in the north, dry forest, coastal, very wet forest on the west coast, Amazonian, 3 mountain ranges, 2 big valleys. There's nothing like this anywhere on earth in terms of biodiversity. So that's, I spent a lot of time on that map there so you could get an idea of what Colombia has that other countries nearby don't have. Even Ecuador doesn't have nearly that many bits of biodiversity. And it's a place that has also, we're still learning a lot about it. So if you look at the number of species here that were known from the country, as relatively recently in the 60s, it was, it's gone up by more than 400 species. And that's not only finding new records for the country, sort of amplifying the distribution of certain birds. A lot of them are splits of species and also brand new species that are discovered. So there are a lot of recent species that might be less than 10 years old that are present there, like this Munchique wood wren that you can go and see. It's not that difficult to find, but it's a brand new species that was only discovered, just maybe 15 years ago. So then you say, well, why isn't then Colombia overrun with birders? Every single birder on earth, should be there. It's the place. But of course, there's issues in the past in particular that have impeded this from happening. So other people, people have been going to Belize, and they've been going to Costa Rica, places that have much less biodiversity than Colombia because of the political and drug trade problems that happened in the past. You probably know Pablo Escobar, and then the El Chapo in Mexico. Well, one of the things that's happened is that the drug trade and the movement of drugs from the South to the US and Europe used to go through a Colombia, Florida route. And then that has moved from a South America, Mexico route. And as the Mexico route got more important, the Colombian drug cartels and so forth have become less important in terms of their, the money they make and so forth. So there's no more guys like Pablo Escobar exactly at that level. So a lot of the problems have actually moved elsewhere in the world. They still exist, but it's not like the drug problem was solved. It's just that it's moved out from Colombia, and a lot of the money moved out of Colombia. And along with it, also the left-wing and paramilitary right-wing groups that were fighting, that in essence, this was sort of a big political problem that's been going on. they were partly involved in the whole drug thing. So they also don't have the funds to keep going in the same way that they used to. And in a sense, that is what's caused the peace that has happened in Colombia, and the peace accords between the FARC, which is one of the revolutionary armed groups, and the government. We kind of try to think of the fact that, oh, this is great, and it happened through great negotiations. It really happened because of completely other socio-political things regarding money and drugs and so forth that moved out of the country. But it's been beneficial for the country and for birders and for the birds, for nature. So that's the background of some of that. And then the Colombia government, once they saw that things were becoming safer and tourists started coming in the 2000s and so forth, then they even started working with the fact that they knew that everybody knew that Colombia had been considered a very risky place. So they started playing with that. And one of their slogans was, Colombia, the only risk is wanting to stay. And then they shifted their entire program of sort of tourism towards an ecotourism bent. And they decided that Colombia, the reason why people all over the world want to come to Colombia is nature. And they wanted to essentially be the new Costa Rica or what have you, even though they have more birds and more things to see than in Costa Rica. So they've actually been working a lot with creating ads with birds, and the government has been funding a lot of the work to actually get birders to come to Colombia. Then COVID arrived, and we got to say that for the last few years, things have been kind of on standstill, and also there's been, some more, political issues due to the fact that, the economy hasn't done as well due to the COVID pandemic. But overall, Colombia is opening up, and there are all these beautiful birds like lance-tailed manakins that you can go and see. It's also a land of contrasts that are really interesting to me. The first place that I landed in one city that is in the coffee-rich part of Colombia, what they call the Coffee Triangle. The locals took me to have coffee, and they took me to Dunkin' Donuts, which I couldn't believe. Here I am in the coffee, place of Earth, and they're drinking Dunkin' Donuts. So it's interesting to me that those contrasts exist. And of course, you can also go and find, the real local farm, completely organic, bird-friendly roasts as well. It's a place that still retains sort of its the fact that it was sort of not open to a lot of the rest of the world for a lot of years. It was sort of doing its own thing, and because it's a large country with a moderately large population and a lot of people who are well educated, it's a very interesting place to go to, in that it has a color, yet it also has a lot of culture, music, good food, and also the Colombians tend to be kind of self-assured people. And it's interesting because it's a little different than going to Ecuador, when sometimes you go in the countryside and people don't seem so self-assured as the Colombians would be. And the big cities are actually big cities with skyscrapers and so forth, and major art museums and all this kind of thing. So it's not necessarily a backward place, but it is definitely a place of contrast, depending on where you are or what part of the country you're in. A lot of the north, people have been going from various other countries in South America to take in places like Tayrona National Park and the beaches, and Cartagena, which are actually very popular destinations, not necessarily for North Americans, but for South Americans. And there you can see birds like this big chicken-like bird called the blue-billed curassow. It's very rare. There are not that many left in the world, but you can, be in a place like this overnight, have, a swim in the middle of the day, and in the morning you can be birding just for a few hours and see something as rare as the blue-billed curassow. So there's a lot of access to really great birding from actually rather comfortable situations. There are also some pretty bad roads too in other places where it's difficult to get to places. So both, like I said, land of contrasts. And it's a country that has a lot of species that are found nowhere else on Earth. And some of them are just fantastic. This is the aptly named multicolored tanager. And this is at a place, at a feeder where all sorts of birds come, including this endemic multicolored tanager. And it's not a bird that, has the regular types of colors that most really bright colored birds have. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, but this mix of colors is so weird to me. Most tanagers have red, and yellows and oranges. And this bird has browns and blues and greens and yellows. It's almost like an entirely different set of the color palette. And having a straw yellow back to me is so unusual, given that it's surrounded by darker colors. You can get lost just thinking about the colors of some of these birds in a place like Colombia. And to be able to see them well is great too. So as I tell people, it's as soon as this COVID thing is, on the wane, it's time to get out there and go and see some of these birds and see some of these places. And although, this might be a very stereotypical thing to put up about Colombia, Juan Valdez, they're actually kind of rather proud of Juan Valdez, because for many years, he was the only, he was sort of a positive figure that people liked, that was out there in the world of, Colombian coffee, as opposed to the negative stuff that was coming out at that same time. And there's a big coffee company called Juan Valdez Coffee that is now big enough that it's starting to open up stores in Florida and other parts of the US, and it's all over South America. It's all Colombian owned. One of the things I was involved in was to help to create the Northern Colombia Birding Trail, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. It includes multiple sites way up in the north. So if you see up here, so right adjacent to Venezuela in the Caribbean coast, the place called Santa Marta. And that's where Tayrona National Park is, that I showed you that hotel a little earlier. It's a beautiful spot where the hills are full of dry forest. And dry forest is actually kind of rare compared to tropical lowland, or what we call rainforest. Although rainforest is more famous, the dry forest often is more special and has some unique birds. And Tayrona is just a gorgeous spot to visit. Beautiful beaches. Like I said, you can go there in the middle of the day and hang out for a little bit before, in between your morning and afternoon birding, see birds that are kind of iconically South American or Latin American, like wood creepers, which they're not creepers and they're not woodpeckers. There's something completely different related to birds that we call the ovenbird group. And some of them are huge, like this cocoa wood creeper, and then woodpeckers, from little green ones and little piculets that are brown to these great big things like lineated woodpecker, which is very closely related to pileated, to some of the relatives of the ivory-billed, which are in the Campophyllus genus. Big, huge wrens that have a look that almost suggests a mockingbird rather than the wren, the bicolored wren, and then oddball raptors of all sorts of kinds, like the crane hawk. And crane hawk has these really, really long legs, and that's where it gets its name. And it uses these legs to actually go and grab chicks from nests. And particularly, they're really good at getting chicks or other little mammals inside if they're in a cavity. So usually birds in cavities are well protected, but not from the crane hawk. They can actually get that big leg in there and grab a squirrel or something from a cavity. So very specific type of ecology that they have. So how I ended up there is that in 2013, one of these international bank groups that is trying to, create economic development in countries that are poor, decided to use birds as a way to go about doing this. And it was through National Audubon. And I was teamed up with John Sterling and Floyd Hayes, also Californians that you might know from, one of them is actually local, right? Floyd, up there to where you guys are. And we put together a program to teach people how to become a birding guide, also what places, could be visited. And the bank wanted to have 4 different countries included: Guatemala, Belize, Bahamas, and Paraguay. So we sort of started with this project with National Audubon. We trained multiple people throughout those 4 countries, and had a very successful run at creating opportunities in very different countries, 2 of them English speaking, 2 of them Spanish speaking. This is a picture from the Bahamas. One of the Matt Jeffries from Audubon, who now leads some of these projects, walking out there. Actually, they were going to survey for piping plovers, I think, that day. And what happened is, from that first project, we got a second infusion of money, this time from USAID, to go to Colombia and specifically take that plan that we learned how to do and incorporate it into a specific northern part of Colombia. That's where the Northern Colombia Birding Trail started. And I'll point out Gloria Lentijo down here. It's the head of Audubon Colombia. So she's still managing new projects to try to get more birding trails happening in Colombia. And the Northern Colombia Birding Trail, we decided what we wanted to do is give options of multiple places where people could visit, either as a tour or if you're an independent birder, where each place had its own guides. And also we trained people to, drivers to take people from one place to the other, and sort of made the entire infrastructure for trying to get more folks to visit this part of Northern Colombia. And it's even in just the scouting for doing this, we found some fantastic birds like black and white owl. And if you can see it here, this is really, really great and often very hard to find owl, the Stygian owl, which we found in the middle of the day up in the Santa Marta Mountains. You can almost not see it. It's like a very dark long-eared owl. These are really gorgeous spots too. Some places that have just a lot going on. Like I said, food, culture, birds, good seafood in the north too. And part of the key was that Audubon and USAID wanted to create opportunities in the dry forest. As I said, dry forest is really important usually, and it's often not, it's not the darling of the conservation world in many ways, because it's scrubby forest and, reminds you of sort of deserty type places, and maybe people don't gravitate to it as an area that has a lot of endemic and special creatures, but it does. So we did want to focus on the dry forest as well as the montane forest and other things that were going on out there. And this is the Guajira Peninsula, which is the driest part of Northern Colombia. And what we had to do is complicated, but it was a lot of good fun too. We identified birding sites, who the hotels would be, infrastructure, who might be interested in guiding, learning to guide, to learn the birds and so forth. I think we created a curriculum in English and Spanish for learning how to become a birding guide. We had teachers come in to teach English to all of the people who were taking part, and that included drivers and sometimes even hotel staff. And then create actual tours, sort of a route. That would be the final trails that you could, use as an Audubon group or as a tour company or as an individual. And then also to then eventually for, other entities to market those things and get people to go out and bird. And it worked. It actually has worked, which is incredible. But I'll show you a few of the spots. We were visiting these red little dots here. So Los Flamencos is the dry forest zone that I just showed you. Tirona was the other spot. This is the famous Santa Marta Mountains. And then there's a couple of spots on the other side of the Santa Martas, which include the Perijá Mountains. And if you just look at it on the other scale here, this Perijá Mountains, this little strip here, is right on the border between Venezuela and Colombia. And it's this isolated mountain range. And so is the Santa Marta. It's completely an isolated mountain range, which means that nearly everything that's on the Santa Marta Mountains is found nowhere else on Earth, because it's just this, like a hotbed of speciation, almost like an island that's sitting there. And there were places too that were just so magical for other reasons. Los Flamencos, apart from being a place that actually does have flamingos, the shorebirds, just fantastic shorebirding and terns and gulls. This is a yellow-billed tern here, but this kind of crummy picture of all these royal terns and so forth in there. There are these dark gulls. It's one of the only places where you can regularly see kelp gull, which is this one from the south, as well as lesser blackback gulls all together. And some of I like gulls. So that was amazing to actually just a surprise, even sort of from a northern perspective of gull watcher, that I'm saying, wow, this might be the only place where you can see these two things together. And also the abundance and diversity of birds, and then the tropical specialties that are out in the shrub, yellow oriole, which is actually one of the best. It's actually about as yellow as an oriole gets, so it's a good name. And the russet-throated puffbird, which if you've never seen a puffbird, they're funny little creatures. They sit tight. They just sort of almost owl-like. They will just sit very quietly, and then they dart out for a big insect. But most of the time, you just see them sitting there, and sometimes they'll sort of sway their tail in a really funky way. When they get excited, they almost do like a little cluck back and forth with their tail. Puffbirds. And here's the male of that fantastic Vermilion Cardinal. And in this case, it really clearly looks more like a cardinal. And then things that, you might never have heard of, this white-whiskered spinetail. That is one of these birds that in the book, it just looks like a brown thing with some dark on the head. But in real life, the browns are so gorgeous with russet tones and rustiness that people see this and they say, wow, that's like a really cool looking bird, but you can't do it justice in the bird book usually. It just seems more like a sparrow than what it really is. And then oddball things like the version of almost like a killdeer down there is a double-striped thickney. It's a shorebird that's out in the dry country, and actually pretty big shorebird, and they're mostly nocturnal. That's why they have those big eyes. The Wayuu people also in the past have much of the tourism there has been people going to the beach and visiting, also to buy some of the handicrafts. So we were able to incorporate some of the handicrafts into the birding tourism so that people would not only go birding there and leave some of their money there as a visiting birder, but also that they would be able to buy handicrafts from other members of the family who might not have been the birding guide. So there was an idea of, as soon as you got birders and other tourists in there, it wasn't just the birding that was creating some of the economic benefits, but it was broader than that, food, lodging, drivers, etc. So it worked out very well. And there was, by the end of it, there were times when we visited and there were multiple groups of people visiting to go birding in this part of Colombia. I remember once going, the last time I visited, 5 different independent groups that were in this part of the world where 10 years previous it would have been 0. So it really did work. And we're hoping it sort of kickstarts again once travel resumes maybe sooner than we think. Well, let's hope. So in the Northern Colombia birding trail, we did also visit some places like Los Besotes, which was a private reserve, and they've kept it kind of small, right? They're not trying to bring in lots of people, but they do have a place where people can stay and visit and see some great, not just birds, but mammals and herps and all sorts of other things in there. And we thought it was important to not just try to work with government entities, but private landowners that would get benefits from keeping their land as forest, rather than doing something else with that land, like cattle or whatever it might be. The Perijá Mountains that I mentioned before, that were at the edge, right on the border between Colombia and Venezuela are really, really neat. And you go up in there and a lot of the birds that are found there have a component that's found further south in the Andes, but nearly every one of the ones, once you get above a certain height, is in a sense isolated from its nearest relative to the south. And a lot of them are really quite different looking. And I think the Perijá Mountains, once they're studied more, will find that a lot of the species in there are actually endemic species to this range. And in the future, they'll all be separated as different species. And there's also some interesting birds that are widespread, like the rosy thrush tanager has a really large range, but it's seldom easy to see. And it's actually related to cardinals, our cardinal group. But you see these birds, some of them already are separate and found nowhere else on Earth, like this Perijá metaltail. But this brushfinch on the left, which is actually quite common, doesn't look like the one further south. And I bet it's a different species when we eventually get to sorting out all the biology of these places. They're very little known still. So much so that we were, when we were visiting there to do our work to try to sort out, the places and so forth, we were able to see this little bird called the Perijá tapaculo, which at that point in time had just the week before been described to science. So we were able to see it. We were the first group to see it after it actually had a name. So that was kind of cool. And, getting back to sort of the bad past of some of these places, nobody could go to the Perijá Mountains back in the 70s, 80s. It was a war zone in the number of people who were involved there in paramilitary type operations. And, it was not, no Colombian would go there. It was the worst. So when we went up there with some Colombian biologists as well as us and so forth, the idea that some of these Colombians had was like, I never thought in my whole life I'd be able to come up here and watch the natural world of the Perijá Mountains, given the history of this place. And all of these people that used to be in there in the forest, they're all gone. I mean, they just disappeared. And now it is entirely, it's safe as most places to go birding. So it's really quite an amazing turnaround that's happened in some parts of Colombia. This bird is called the Lacrimos mountain tanager because it has this little teardrop here, and that's what lacrimos means, like a little teardrop. But this is the one found throughout the Andes. This is the one in the Perijá, totally different and almost certainly an endemic species once we sort out the biology. So it's really one of the most exciting places I've been to, where I was able to go before a lot of biologists had really gotten there. And now you can go to a lodge, visit, go birding there. And it's started to become sort of a well-known spot to visit. It's beautiful too. Roads are really nasty, so you need to go in 4x4 vehicles, and that's all part of the plan too, to have big Toyotas and so forth that are comfortable and can take luggage, and a group can divide into 2 vehicles and get up to these places where the roads are still old school, let's put it like that. And the Santa Marta Mountains are that triangle there that I mentioned, that's like an island. And they are really unique in not only that they're isolated, but it is the highest point in Colombia. This is sort of, it kind of boggles your mind. The highest point in Colombia is not in the Andes. It's part of this isolated mountain range near the coast. It's the highest mountain near the coast anywhere on Earth. So that the snow-capped part is actually not easily reachable. So you can see the snow-capped part as a birder, but you can't get there. There's no road that takes you up there right now. So you'd have to go camping and slogging with mules to get up in there. And maybe you're into that, but we didn't do it. And to give you an idea of how the endemism, it's 27% of Colombia's endemic birds are found in this mountain range. And similarly, plants, insects, all the other stuff that's in there, also nowhere else on Earth can you find it, just in this one triangular mountain range. some of them are pretty neat, like this blossom crown, Santa Marta blossom crown hummingbird that looks, you know, a lot of hummingbirds get that pollen look on the head. This one has the pollen look all the time. It's part of the feathering. That's what the blossom crown name refers to. And a beautiful nature reserve with a great place to stay called El Dorado is up in there. And also access to different elevations. So in the bottom part, the warmer part, you can see Santa Marta foliage gleaners and all sorts of other species, as opposed to when you go further up. And the hummingbird feeders here are incredible, with birds that are striking, like this white-tailed star frontlet, and others that are more widespread, like rufous-tailed hummingbird. Lazuli saberwings also not a widespread species, a nice one to see. When I first saw this owl, Santa Marta screech owl, it didn't have a name. It was an unnamed owl, and you could see it outside the lodge. If you worked hard enough, you could find them. But fortunately now it's been classified, named, and you can actually put it on your eBird list with a name. Back in a few years ago, you had to put it down as unnamed screech owl from the Santa Marta Mountains. And it's a good looking owl. It comes in rufous or gray brown forms, and it's great to be able to see something that's not that difficult to find, because the local guides know where to find them, and to think they've only been known to science for a short while. And the endemic birds there include a lot of warblers, because warblers actually like colder climates. So being up in the mountains or in the Andes is where a lot of the South American warblers are. So Santa Marta warbler has all this white coloration on the head, and then the white lord warbler looks more like, a little bit more like McGillivray's or something like that. And then there are sparrow types birds like the Santa Marta brushfinch, which are common at the lodge, and others that are hard to find, like the Santa Marta parakeet. But again, there's projects to put nest boxes and things for them, so to make it a little easier to find them, and also so they can breed more safely. So there's so many different birds that you can see over there, and also some great mammals, you know, crab-eating fox and howler monkeys, red howler monkeys, that you'll hear every day that you're up there. And part of our project was not just about birds, it was about people. We trained a lot of people, we made a lot of friends. We had a great time, actually. And one of the people who really has to be sort of congratulated for his work here is John Myers. John was sort of the person who thought this whole thing up, from the initial project with the World Banks, the Development Bank, to the Colombia project that I was involved in later. And he's still a champion for Colombia and birding. He's working both in various parts of South America right now. But we had sessions where we would, you know, teach not only bird identification, but how to deal with clients, what North Americans and Europeans expected in terms of guiding. There was a lot of it was about culture. And one of the reasons I was there is that I'm bilingual. So I can kind of, you know, say this is what North Americans expect, but also be able to say that in Spanish in a way that made sense to the locals. And like I said, some people were YU indigenous folks. Other people, like these two folks here, are landowners. So they actually have big chunks of land and they're interested in birds and become birders, and also just great birds that are found on their land. So they're trying to do something that's more innovative and interesting to them than just, you know, felling the trees, selling the wood. They would rather have it be forest and bird rich and somehow make a living from that, rather than an exploitative type way to deal with the land. So it's been great to meet people like that as well. And some of the photographs of the folks, the YU folks, like the Pushina family, like Yerli's here. And she was part of a family that includes one of the original birders in the north, and that's Jose Luis. Jose Luis over here, he's an amazing person. Daniel Uribe is a well-known, one of the first birding guides in Colombia. And Jose Luis used to see that every so often people would come around looking for birds, and he would tag along, and he learned all about birds. And then once this project was started, he already was well into birding, and he's become sort of the top kind of guide up in the north of the country. And to think that a guy that grew up not speaking Spanish in his household now speaks English fluently, travels all around the world, talking to people about Colombian birds, has found amazing records. He's a great birder. And to give somebody that opportunity, and also economic benefits he's had, it's amazing to see, you know, in just a few years. And then he's taught his village, people in his village, how to do this. So now there's a whole team of birders up there, thanks to Jose Luis. From this, you know, in this 2017, there was a bird fair in Cali, Colombia, and that's happened, you know, for many years, where hundreds of people from all over Colombia come to learn about birds, and they're mostly Colombians. And they want to know about their own country's biodiversity. And, you know, people mainly from the city who tend to have more money, you know, they might be people who are bankers or what have you, and they're photographers. They too are taking part in this economy in their own country, where, in a sense, some of the money from the city is moving towards the countryside through nature tourism. The government has been incredible from the USAID project. Then the next projects have all been funded by the Colombian government. And they want to fund eventually 9 more birding trails throughout the country. There in 2017, we got one going in the coffee-rich area near Cali, where you can see this creature called the red-ruffed fruit crow. It's a cotinga. And from there, they've created birding trails sort of in the south, up in here, the Coffee Triangle, etc. So it's been a really kind of fantastic project. That I was involved also in the Coffee Triangle one that includes some of the Andes, where you can see this helmet crest is a hummingbird, a gorgeous crest, also really long tail, and lodges that are almost strictly birder centric, like Tinamu Lodge, Rio Blanco. There's lots of these lodges that have opened up that are Montezuma Reserve as well, just for birders. And they've become quite popular, and you can see amazing numbers of birds, species and individuals, and some of them quite unusual. The olive finch is actually very difficult to find elsewhere in the world, but you can see it in Montezuma, or birds like the fruit eater, scale fruit eater, which is a cotinga fruit-eating species. And the hummingbirds and tanagers, I think, steal the show. So these are some pictures. One of my favorites is this one lower right here, the rainbow-bearded thornbill. It's got a little bill, like, so that's the thorn, but it actually does have a beard that is multiple colored, like a rainbow. And then some of them become so accustomed to people that you can hand feed them with little hummingbird feeders. And this is the aptly named golden-breasted puffleg. It looks like it's wearing, you know, pants from the 70s. And just an assortment of hummingbirds that's bewildering, shining sunbeam, star frontlets. And also the idea of people putting out worms to facilitate seeing some very, very difficult and shy birds has caught on in Colombia, as it started in Ecuador. And chestnut-crowned antpitta, brown-banded antpittas, you can go and see these birds that in the past, especially this brown-banded antpitta, would have been nearly impossible to see. And you can sit there very quietly, get photographs, and they come back day after day. In 2018, so a little bit more recently, we had then Colombian government funding to survey more regions. And now these are the 4 regions that are right now available as routes from the northern Colombia to central, the eastern Andes and southwestern Andes. Like I said, there's also an idea of expanding to have maybe 9 different trails so that every part of Colombian ecosystem is covered by a birding trail. So It's a fantastic journey that I've been sort of lucky enough to be involved in, and have affected, hopefully, some people as well as birds in terms of conservation. And I think some of the most fun things have been meeting all these folks that are interested in birds, just like we are, and learning about their history, and me teaching them sort of about my birding and my history. And through that also, I've put together some trips that we hope by June people be able to go and visit Colombia again. And this one is going to be led by one of the local experts, Andrea Beltran. So she's in the Coffee Triangle area, and sort of we start in Cali, and then in June 20th, go to the 2nd of July, visiting the various parts of the Andes, as well as valley regions, and also tasting some good coffee. And we're hoping that we can get back to the Santa Marta Mountains at some point. We're just, kind of watching the Omicron, see what it does. A lot of things now in birding tourism are done right at the last moment. So we may even be able to pull off a trip to Santa Marta this year. But hopefully you got some good ideas of what is going on in Colombia in terms of birds, why it's special, the amazing types of birds that are found there, and also this amazing mix of economists, birders, local people coming together to try to create a certain different kind of local economy that's going to affect people positively, and in turn will affect habitats and birds positively. I'll just let you go with, I'll take some questions, at the end, but also let you know that I've been involved with several friends, with Molly Brown and George Armistead. I'm putting together a podcast, members joining in. So I'm kind of looking into getting some more stuff up in there. We're trying to put together a sparrow master class, or a workshop that's going to have all the sparrows of North America. So we'll see if we can pull that off in the near future. And pelagics next season. So we'll see you there, I hope. And thanks for inviting me. And I'm glad I could fill in last moment.
Well, Alvaro, thank you so much. This was a fascinating program. And Lucas and I were able to go to Costa Rica and to see how they've really transformed their economy using birding and nature guides.
Yeah.
This is very similar to that. And it's powerful work, because hopefully it's saving habitat, saving birds at the same time, as well as educating the local people who are there and can play a big role in saving birds and habitat. So it's fantastic. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, one of the things that really struck me is it was Jose Luis in the north who said to me, I feel like I'm the luckiest person on earth, because I work hard, I do lots of interesting things, but I'm having the time of my life. And I was thinking, can you imagine somebody who his other option would have been to work in some field somewhere, doing manual labor, and yet he has the skills, the ability, the interest in birds, and he's really transformed his life into just not only to a fun existence. I think that was really powerful for me. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, I know for a fact we had at one point 44 people participating, and a
Right.
lot of people are just like us. There's more than one person on the screen. So we really appreciate your ability to deliver this to probably close to 60 folks or 70 folks. So it's really awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was a little rusty with some of these things and trying to put it all together in my head, but it was good to relive it too.
Yeah.
For me.
Great. Any questions for Alvaro?
Can I ask you? Sure.
You'll have to unmute yourself if you're muted.
Let me stop sharing this here. Oh,
There we go.
Yeah, I don't know if somebody put anything in the chat too.
Oh yeah.
Oh, thank you there. Yeah, don't be shy. So if anybody wants to ask a question, unmute, that's fine.
So has this been recorded so that others can hear it?
Yes, we record all of our sessions and then I try to get them up on our website the next day or within 2 days.
Okay, thank you.
The website, ask them the website.
That podcast is such a good idea, Alvaro, because
Oh, thanks.
you can just listen to it in your bed, just when you're about to fall asleep, you can have that.
That's why we did it. Yeah.
And give us the
Lucas is
address
only
one more
the
time.
Teenager.
Give us the address one more time.
It's very simple, www.napasolanoaudubon.com.
Thank you.
Yeah, the idea of podcasting. I used to listen to a lot of podcasts, but I thought there were several birding ones, but I always thought the most fun part of birding sometimes was just sort of telling stories and sort of chatting about birds, and I think we've kind of succeeded at getting that, just sort of chatting about various aspects of birding and birds and identification, distribution, and it works.
Yeah.
It really
So
does.
I think Robin Leong has his hand up.
Yeah, Alvaro, I went there in 2012, before Vint and all those other people started going because of FARC. And I must say, we went through those 3 ranges and up to Santa Marta. And it was one of the most rigorous. We were in a bus.
Oh, wow.
It was the most rigorous drive-through with so many curves. Our bodies got battered quite a bit. And, we had to change from the bus to a 4-wheel drive to a motorcycle, crazy stuff like that. But the birds are and the coffee is just unreal.
Yeah.
Everybody should go if you have a chance.
Yeah, we
You get to see this new part that you guys have discovered, that scrub area there.
yeah. No, the idea of like the roads, when we saw some of these roads were not passable in certain vehicles, we thought the way to do this is really have comfortable 4x4s and not crowd people. So, 1 4x4 with a driver and 3 people, that's it. And then, we would divide up the groups and everybody would have a radio, and it was a lot more comfortable than trying to do this on a big bus or a crowded.
How did you get, I had a little bit of altitude sickness at Santa Marta. And you drive up pretty fast to go to the top, and then you have to go even further up, above 10,000 to get some of those birds, like the parakeet.
We stayed in the sort of lower mid elevation and then the upper elevation, and then stayed there a day before we went up to the top. So we did it over several days, not just all the way up in one go. So we didn't have any of those issues, but it's gorgeous. Just amazing.
I don't know how much experience other folks have. I have very little tropical birding experience, but as I said, we did go to Costa Rica. And what's amazing to me is that many of the birds you shared, they're in the same family groups of the Costa Rican birds that we were able to see. So once you get your feet wet, I think it's much easier to bird in the tropics, because you can tell the families that the bird belongs to, and then that really helps with identification.
Yeah, exactly. So that it's even within woodpeckers, is it one of those small green ones, or is it one of the big black and white, red ones? Is it a wood creeper? Is it, an ant bird versus an ant pitta? You start all these things that seem like I'm never going to learn those, but once you get it into a group, then there's only 2 or 3, or sometimes just 1 in an area that this, and it becomes a lot more straight.
Tapaculos, man.
Tapacula.
Well, I was really amazed that you were able to see those ant pittas, because we were in the Costa Rican brush trying to see them, and they hide.
Yeah.
They're very challenging to see. But it's, I think, being able to go to a preserve and have a place, whatever you call them, a birding center or resort,
Right.
where you can stay, and they've actually been close enough to the birds that they're getting more used to people
Yeah.
coming out. That's fantastic.
Jennifer Lamb asked a question here. I see that the weather, what it's like, and what time of year to travel. It's actually a good question, because you're not too far away from the equator, so you would think, oh, the weather's the same all the time, but it isn't. It's rainfall that really varies. So what we tend to do is we go in. There's usually near the tropics 2 dry seasons and 2 wet seasons. So we avoid the wet seasons, and that means going in the summer or the winter, but not the spring or the fall, roughly. So there's a drier air time in June, and the drier times are December, January, and it varies by location. So that might be what you want to do in one part of Colombia, and a little different in another part of Colombia. But because of elevation up at the top, it can be cold. So we even have to pack sometimes, a warm hat and all that type of stuff. While, a couple of days later, you could be in this steamy tropics. And that is also why there's so much diversity there. So we try to go when the weather's most pleasant for birds and birding, and the roads aren't washed out because of rain. So
Alvaro, so I know seabirding is like a thing in other South American countries. Have you ever done any in Colombia, or no?
no, it's not well known. And if you're going to do any seabirding, would be in the Pacific coast rather than the Caribbean. And it's more likely the water's kind of shallow, close to shore. I would say maybe in the far south of Colombia, there might be some more interesting stuff, but it's not as good as if you go to Peru or further south for seabirding. So yet, if you're in that, the north for gulls and shorebirds was fantastic. I mean, incredible. Where the kind of place where you might turn up some interesting thing that nobody ever thought was there, even European things that could be running around in there. So,
Of course.
yeah.
Other questions for Alvaro before we sign off? He's a gold mine of information, folks, so don't be shy.
Well, I was happy to talk to you all. It's
Well,
great.
once again, I want to thank you for stepping in with very short notice. I think I texted him, was it last night or the night
Yeah, something
before?
like it's pretty. Yes.
Hey, Kemmons, we know you.
Yeah, it's no problem.
So that was very informational, and it's very powerful, the work that's happening there, and what a transformation from what it was 40 or 50 years ago. I just
Yeah.
can't get over it.
Yeah, and well, let's hope that pretty soon, people will be out traveling, feeling safe to be out doing that, and we need to give it time, but it'll happen. So
Great.
yeah.
All
Well,
right.
thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for attending. I appreciate your time, and I hope you really enjoyed it as much as we did. Our next speaker will be February, come up calendar, should be February the 10th. And we are having Leah Gartner come and speak to us about ticks and everything you need to know about ticks. So she spoke, I think, to Audubon several years back and was very, very popular. And so we're bringing her back again to share her world of information on ticks. So if you're out and about and get ticks, you better come and watch next month's presentation. Well, thanks folks for coming, and we'll see you again next month. Join us on one of our weekly walks or our monthly field trip. Come and meet Tammy Sanders. She delivers some of our beginning birder walks as well. So thank you very much for attending, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.